The murder of Junko Furuta. Junko Furuta was born on the 18th of January 1971 and grew up in Misato, Saitama Prefecture, where she lived with her parents, older brother, and younger brother. At the time of her murder, she was a 17-year-old senior at Yoshio Minami High School, and worked a part-time job at a plastic molding factory from October 1988 to save up money for a planned graduation trip. Furuta also accepted a job at an electronics retailer, where she planned on working after graduation. Furuta was well liked by her classmates and teachers, and had high grades and infrequent absences. According to her friends, she dreamed of becoming an idol singer. The perpetrators of the crime were four male teenagers: Hiroshi Miyano, Miyano Hiroshi, 18 years old; Joe Ogura Joe, Shinji Minato, Minato Shinji, 16, and Yasushi Watanabe, Watanabe Yasushi, 17, who in court documents were referred to as A, B, C, and D, respectively. Two others, Tetsuo Nakamura and Koichi Ihara, were referred to as G and L. The four members of the group had all dropped out of high school in the summer of 1988, and became involved in organized crime as Chinpira, low-ranking Yakuza. They began using Minato's family home in Adaki, Tokyo, as a hangout. Beginning in October, they engaged in various crimes including theft, purse snatching and car theft, assault, and rape. On November 8, the group abducted a 19-year-old woman in Adaki and gang raped her in a hotel there. On the 27th of December, during Furuta's captivity, the group abducted another 19-year-old woman in Adaki and gang raped her in a motel.
Murder of Junko Furuta. Native name, location Misato, Saitama, Japan. Abduction Adaki, Tokyo, Japan. Confinement and murder. Date: the 25th of November 1988 to the 4th of January 1989. Attack type: abduction, rape, torture, murder. Victim: Junko Furuta. Perpetrators: Hiroshi Miyano, now Hiroshi Yokoyama, Joe Ogura, later Joe Kamisaku, Shinji Minato, Yasushi Watanabe. Motive unknown. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Convictions: abduction for the purpose of sexual assault. Confinement, rape, assault, murder, abandonment of a corpse. Sentence: Miyano, 20 years in prison, served 20, Ogura, 5 to 10 years in prison, served 10. Minato, 5 to 9 years in prison, served 9. Watanabe, 5 to 7 years in prison, served 7. Compensation: Miyano's parents pay 50 million yen, about $350,000 United States dollars, $800,000 today, to Furuta's parents. On the evening of the 25th of November 1988, Miyano and Minato rode around Misato on their motorcycles with the intention of robbing and raping local women, and spotted Furuta, who was on her way home from her part-time job. Acting on Miyano's orders, Minato kicked Furuta off her bicycle and fled the scene. Miyano, under the pretense of witnessing the attack by coincidence, approached Furuta and offered to walk her home. After further gaining her trust, Miyano walked Furuta to a nearby warehouse and threatened her, telling her that he was a Yakuza member and that he would spare her only if she followed his orders. That night, Miyano took Furuta by taxi to a hotel in Adaki, where he raped her. He later called Minato's house and bragged to Ogura about the rape, after which Ogura told him not to let Furuta leave. In the early morning hours of November 26, Miyano took Furuta to a park near the hotel, where Ogura, Minato, and Watanabe were waiting. They told her they knew where she lived, and that the Yakuza would kill her family if she attempted to escape. Minato agreed to allow Furuta to be confined in a room on the second floor of his house in Adaki for the purpose of gang raping her. Furuta was held captive a total of 40 days. On the 27th of November, Furuta's parents contacted the police about her disappearance. To discourage further investigation, the kidnappers forced Furuta to call her mother 3 times to convince her that she had run away but was safe and staying with friends. When Minato's parents were present at the house where she was being confined, Furuta was forced to act as his girlfriend. The group dropped this pretense when it became clear that Minato's parents would not report them to the police. The parents later claimed that they did not intervene because they were afraid of their son, who had been increasingly violent toward them. On the night of November 28, Miyano and the others, along with Nakamura and Ihara, gang raped Furuta, after which Miyano shaved her pubic hair with a razor and used a match to burn her genital area. In early December, as punishment for an escape attempt, the group repeatedly punched Furuta in the face, and Miyano burned her ankles with a lighter. They forced Furuta to dance to music while naked, masturbate in front of them, and stand on the balcony in the middle of the night with little clothing, and inserted objects into her vagina and anus, including a metal rod and a bottle. They also forced her to drink large amounts of alcohol, milk, and water, smoke 2 cigarettes at once, and inhale paint thinner fumes. In one attack in the middle of the month, Furuta was beaten by the group on the pretext that Miyano had stepped on a puddle of her urine, after which he burned her thighs and hands several times with lighter fluid. From around this time, Furuta, unable to bear the repeated assaults, would sometimes plead to be killed by her captors. Throughout the rest of December, the severity of Furuta's abuse continued to escalate, and by the end of the month she was severely malnourished after being fed only small amounts of food and eventually only milk. Due to her injuries, she had become unable to walk to the downstairs toilet, and was confined to the room's floor in a state of extreme weakness. Her appearance had been altered by the beatings, with her face becoming swollen to the point of unrecognizability, and her wounds had started to emit a foul odor. Murder and investigation. On the 4th of January 1989, after losing money in a game of mahjong the night before, Miyano decided to take his anger out on Furuta. He ignited a candle and dripped hot wax on her face, placed 2 shortened candles on her eyelids, and forced her to drink her own urine. Furuta was lifted and kicked, fell onto a stereo unit, and began a fit of convulsions. To prevent them from being stained with blood, the group covered their hands in plastic bags before beating her with their fists and an iron exercise ball, and dropped the ball on her abdomen several times. Miyano poured lighter fluid on Furuta and set her on fire. She made weak attempts to put herself out, but soon stopped moving. The assault lasted for about 2 hours, after which Furuta died at 10 a.m. Less than 24 hours after her death, Minato's brother called to tell him that Furuta appeared to be dead. Afraid that their crime would be discovered, the group wrapped Furuta's body in a blanket and placed it in a large travel bag, then put the bag in a metal drum and filled it with wet concrete. At around 8 p.m. on January 5, the group drove to a vacant lot near a construction site on the island of Wakasu in Koto, Tokyo, and dumped the drum there. In early 1989, Miyano and Ogura were arrested for kidnapping and gang raping the 19-year-old woman in December 1988. When police interrogated Miyano, he wrongly believed that Ogura had already confessed to Furuta's murder and that the police were aware of this, so he told them where to find her body. The police were initially puzzled by his confession, as they were questioning him about a different murder. The drum containing Furuta's body was recovered on March 29, and she was identified via fingerprints. Minato, Watanabe, Minato's brother, Nakamura, and Ahara were also arrested. The identities of the defendants were sealed by the court, as they were all legally juveniles, under age 20. Journalists from the Shukan Bunshin tabloid uncovered their identities and published them, arguing that the accused did not deserve to have their right to anonymity upheld, given the severity of the crime. In July 1990, all were found guilty and sentenced by the Tokyo District Court for abduction for the purpose of sexual assault, confinement, rape, assault, murder, and abandonment of a corpse. All 4 appealed. In July 1991, 3 were re-sentenced to longer terms by the Tokyo High Court. Hiroshi Miyano was originally sentenced to 17 years in prison, and re-sentenced to 20 years, the longest sentence typically given in Japan short of life imprisonment, which had been sought by the prosecution. Miyano's parents sold their family home and paid Furuta's parents 50 million yen, about $350,000 United States dollars. $800,000 today, in compensation, which their son's defense presented as a mitigating circumstance. A court-ordered psychological evaluation at the trial established that Miyano had a learning disability that did not impair his brain function, but delayed his emotional development. After his release in 2009, he changed his last name to Yokoyama. He reportedly boasted about his Yakuza connections and involvement in pyramid schemes. In 2013, Yokoyama was arrested on suspicion of bank fraud and placing scam phone calls, but remained silent and was not charged. Joe Ogura was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison. He was released in 1999, changed his last name to Kamisaku, and began working in an IT position. In 2000, Kamisaku married a Chinese woman and moved to Chiba Prefecture, but divorced after a few years and returned to his mother's home in Saitama. He lost his job after his past became known to his colleagues, and again became involved in the Yakuza. In 2004, Kamisaku was arrested for assaulting Takatashi Isono, a 27-year-old acquaintance whom he thought was involved with a girlfriend. He shoved Isono into the trunk of a car and drove to his mother's bar in Misato, where he assaulted him for 4 hours. 12. Kamisaku was sentenced to 4 years in prison. 11. After his release in 2009, he relied on welfare and lived alone in an apartment in Saitama, where he died in an accident on the 16th of July 2022, at age 51. While on a psychiatric medication, he collapsed in his bathroom and got his head stuck between the toilet bowl and tank, where he aspirated on his vomit. Shinji Minato was originally sentenced to 5 to 6 years in prison, and re-sentenced to 5 to 9 years. His parents and brother were not charged. After his release in 1998, Minato moved in with his mother. In 2018, Minato, then unemployed, was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after striking a 32-year-old man in the shoulder with a metal baton and slashing his neck with a knife on a street in Kawaguchi, Saitama, during a dispute over a vehicle parking spot. In 2019, Minato was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison, suspended with probation for 3 years. Yasushi Watanabe was originally sentenced to 3 to 4 years in prison, and re-sentenced to 5 to 7 years. He further appealed the verdict to the Supreme Court of Japan, but his appeal was denied in July 1992. He was released in 1996, and left his hometown to live with his mother. From the time the case was first reported in the media, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, the investigating body, received many calls and letters from the general public demanding that the perpetrators be severely punished, including by life imprisonment or with the death penalty. The Tokyo Public Prosecutor's Office, which had sought life imprisonment for Miyano during the trial, was criticized for not seeking life sentences for the other perpetrators, nor seeking the death penalty. The Tokyo District Court also received numerous calls and letters which criticized the perceived lightness of its sentencing, though a majority of legal professionals surveyed by the Asahi Shimbun newspaper said that the sentences were appropriate based on precedent. In the trial for the 1988 Nagoya couple murder case, Nagoya Abeku Satsujin Jiken, Nagoya Abeku Satsujin Jiken, the Nagoya District Court sentenced the main defendant, a 19-year-old boy, to death in June 1989, and a second defendant, a 17-year-old boy, to life imprisonment. This case drew comparisons to the Furuta case. Hiroshi Itakura, a professor of law at Nihon University, commented that the difference in sentencing was explained by the difference in the number of victims, 2 in the Nagoya case, versus 1 in the Furuta case. Under the Nagayama standard, the legal standard used in Japan for the death penalty, 1 murder victim means life imprisonment or less is given, while 2 victims is considered a borderline case. Itakura also stated that the prosecution in the Nagoya case had demonstrated clear intent and premeditation, while in the Furuta case, the intent to murder was more unclear. Furuta's funeral was held on the 2nd of April 1989. During the ceremony, one of her friends delivered a eulogy written by her classmates, which stated, "Jun-chan, welcome back. I never dreamed we would meet again like this. You were subjected to such cruelty, weren't you? You went through so much, didn't you? I'm upset with myself that I went on living, unaware of what was happening. You were always so gentle and cheerful, Jun-chan. The happy we made for the cultural festival looked wonderful on you. I'll never forget that. We will absolutely not let Jun-chan's death be in vain. As we step into adulthood, we'll strive for a world where such heinous crimes no longer exist. We'll do our best, keeping Jun-chan in our hearts and pushing forward. The principal even brought your diploma. Thanks to this, all 47 of us in class 3 to 8 were able to graduate. Jun-chan. There's no more pain or suffering now. Rest peacefully. Farewell, Jun-chan." Furuta's intended future employer presented her parents with the uniform she would have worn in her position, and it was placed in her casket. At her graduation, the principal presented her parents with her diploma. The location on Wakasu where her body was discovered is now an industrial zone.